Three, two, one. All right. Hello, everyone. We often hear that on-chain data is open and that is transparent. And at the same time, we hear that there is a lot of on-chain analytics that we can do. But the question is that really the case in real life, in practice? So today, what I'm going to talk about is the problem of on-chain data and how to deal with it through standardization of metrics. I'm Mihai. I lead the Web3 protocol research team at Messari. And together with my team, we put a lot of data standardization and metrics for over 40 protocols out there. So we're covering L1s, L2s. We're covering also Web3, mid-layer infrastructure, and consumer. And one example of actually our work is exactly what I have at my back. The typical consumers of these charts are enterprises. They are investors. They are protocols themselves, but also crypto enthusiasts. And we very often get a series of questions from them with respect to how are we able to standardize and source all this data to create these charts, and how are you actually able to put these charts all together and display them. So in order for me to actually get you step by step through how we get to this output, I'm going to start with the very basic things first. So essentially what we do is we're analyzing who does what and when on-chain. And how this looks actually in practice is a little bit like this. So on the darker background, we have a transaction in hex. And then next to it, we have Etherscan. So it's that interpretation of the transaction. And there, if we look carefully, we can see who did what and when. And besides that, we have some protocols that are actually a bit friendlier and that aggregate different transactions all together. And you can see a series of transactions. And also there, we have in the columns like who does what and when. Now, the question is, how do we put this thing at work? So what can we do with this? And essentially, it boils down to classifying transactions and classifying who does those transactions. And one typical example here is to aggregate revenue of a protocol. So here in this example, we see supply-side revenue that is accrued by node operators, so by the supply-side participants of protocols. But then at the same time, we have protocol revenue that is actually accrued by the transaction fees or like the usage fees that are accrued by the protocol. So this is one example here of what we can do. And whenever I'm showing this to Jimmy, the investor, the question that I get back from him is actually, okay, Mihai, you give me one metric, you give me revenue about one protocol. However, I would like to put this in context. I would really like to see how this protocol performs against other protocols. I would like to see to what extent actually this revenue generation is sustainable or not, to what extent the protocol makes enough money, who uses the protocol, is that usage sustainable over time, are the users sticky or are they churning? So all these questions are being asked by investors, and when getting back to them and saying, okay, so what do you actually need besides actually having like metrics in isolation? After like countless conversations, we come up with a list of requirements. So a list of target protocols that they are looking at. So normally, let's say we take lending protocols and looking at which of them have growing revenue and deposits. So then I'm asking Jimmy again, so why aren't you able to actually do this today? So this boils down to the problem that we all have, and it's essentially like this. So starting with data source A. So Jimmy goes on a portal and tries to aggregate different metrics for his protocols. And essentially what you see here, you have coverage only for one metric. And then for all the other metrics, the coverage is very, very sparse. And then, of course, like data source A is not enough. So you go and check data source B. And here the situation looks a bit differently. So you have like better coverage in terms of like different metrics. However, not all the protocols are being covered. And of course, whenever you try to merge actually these two data sources, you get something like this, which is a combination between data source A and data source B. And you see that still some metrics are completely missing. But then I'd like to point the attention to revenue. So in this case, you have revenue coming from like, both sources. And Jimmy is telling me, well, actually, the problem that I'm having is I don't know whether I should choose like data source A or I should choose data source B. And the problem here is the values are very different from each other, and there is also no given methodology in what way these data sources are actually being computed. So there isn't something that one can track over time and can go back and actually check whether those numbers make sense. Yeah, so this is where we actually come into play, and this is what we are building at Messari. So we are building standardization schemas together with the graph that are called subgraphs, where we define standards for the industry. So we define standards with respect to what do we understand with respect to usage, what do we understand with respect to value accrual and revenue, and what do you understand with respect to governance and quantifying governance decisions. So this is a snapshot of the open source software that we write together in a partnership with the graph. And if you go to subgraphs.messari.io, you can see that we've already developed over 100 such standardized subgraphs for quite a lot of protocols out there in the industry. And if you want to see like what the output of this is, so you see like a list of protocols here, and we essentially have the same standardized methodology for which we compute different types of revenue. Now, how do we use this actually in our products? How do we use this to come up with charts? So I'm going to show you a couple of charts here. So the first one is related to usage. So essentially what we did here is my colleague Ali went to the Lens ecosystem, and she was able to aggregate all the users of applications that are built in the Lens ecosystem. And what she was able to see is that Lenster is the application in the ecosystem that actually attracts most of the users from other applications. And this is only possible due to the openness of the data and being able to actually quantify and track who was the user across all of these different applications. If we move into value accrual or into revenue in terms of comparability, my colleague Sammy here has put together total revenue for different DeepIn or like decentralized physical infrastructure networks. And what he was able to see in this case is that two protocols on the decentralized storage and decentralized compute space are actually holding quite well with respect to revenue, although the whole sector is pretty much declining in terms of revenue at the moment. And then if we go to staking and inflation, so this is actually the first chart that I've shown in the presentation. So here what we can see is a beautiful mechanism that this protocol is using. So essentially the protocol has a dynamic adjustment of the inflation. So whenever the staking participation is below 50%, the inflation is actually growing. And whenever staking participation is above the target equilibrium level of 50%, actually the inflation goes down. So you can see here, since of February, we have inflation growing because staking participation suddenly dropped below 50%. And my interest here over the next quarter is actually to look whether staking participation will increase over time, being incentivized by this growth in inflation. Now we put together not only charts, but we also put together tables and standardized tables. So this is how our standardization looks like for decentralized compute protocol. In this case, it's LivePeer. So yeah, we have financials and key performance indicators as well as staking metrics that we put together. What we do is we track this on a daily basis, and these are snapshots on quarterly basis. We aggregate all of this into quarterly reports that we publish for almost 40 protocols by now. All right, so this is only the tip of the iceberg. Actually, at Messari, we do much more than this. So we are a company of 100 plus crypto geeks. Essentially, half of the company is out of engineers. The other half of the company is researchers. And yeah, what we do is we do a lot of on-chain data engineering. We aggregate a lot of governance decisions, venture deals, diligence reports, and of course, research reports. All right, so in case you'd like to find out more about like our next product releases, we're going to organize Messari Mainnet conference in New York in September. We're going to have a couple of product launches there around data. In case you want to play with our protocol explorer, please go ahead, please do so. In case you want to read our research and also our engineering blogs, they are pasted over there. And also in case you want to contribute to our open source development efforts, our developers are happy to help and to include you in the community. And thank you so much.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes for questions, if anyone.
Go.
Yeah, thanks. That's really interesting. And all of us have tried looking at chain data, know these pain points. One of the things I was wondering about is, are you also planning on including metrics around the more standard product market fit metrics like retention of users, maybe cost of acquisition, lifetime value? Because stuff like TVL and so on is kind of like a bit of a vanity metric. Like if you're actually using, if you want to analyze how good a protocol is, it's a bit, not always that useful.
Yeah, I love your question because I've been thinking exactly about including vanity metrics and actually presenting some of them in these slides. But yeah, to your point, we're looking actively at usage actually. So we're putting together several analyses on especially, who sticks with the protocol for longer and is not there only for, some initial incentives. So we're definitely looking at that. And yeah, in terms of client acquisition costs, it's essentially how much of the rewards that you give away are actually taken by some of the users that maybe might flock, so might just leave the protocol after 2 weeks. So yeah, we're definitely looking into that. And one of the slides that I've shown on usage is actually looking at to what extent actually users leave one application to go into the other one. Thank you.
Talking about vanity metrics, to what extent are you planning to integrate data that is not on-chain? Because many of the non-vanity things needs additional insights beyond on-chain transactions. Yeah,
so we work with a lot of off-chain data, as a matter of fact, and this is unavoidable for us. So in order to have completeness of metrics, you will have something that is out there on-chain, and then we have to feed the holes with off-chain data. And yeah, we're speaking with protocols and we're trying to determine them to expose off-chain data that they have into block explorers, into dashboards, and then working together with them into defining APIs, and then probably also getting them a subgraph and being able to standardize their data. Great question. We're having that problem on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm actually have a question for the on-chain data source. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit lost when you say there are two different sources giving you different values. Mm-hmm. If the on-chain data has its own ground truth, wouldn't it just be there?
Right. So this is one example, one hypothetical example of data source A and data source B that a typical user or a typical investor will have a look at. So maybe you can think of the major data aggregators out there. You can pick your favorite one, and then it's already secondhand. That would be data from third-party providers, and this is essentially what investors or other crypto lovers will have a look at. So what we're saying is actually we have to go to the ground source. We have to go to on-chain data to source that. Yeah. But great question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. You know the drill. If you want to ask more questions, reach outside for Mihai. Thank you.